Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode 255, and we have a question by Jacob Durbin, our very own Jader, on the Age of Steam Roundhouse. The specific wording of this question is, also I'm sorry if I sound a little hoarse, is, did you all do anything with the Age of Steam fleet / facilities? And the thing to consider at this point in time is the Age of Steam facilities had just barely been put together. The roundhouse was barely done, and most of the outbuildings that they had planned effectively didn't exist. It's not what it was bound to be, and it never got to be what it was bound to be, because honestly we didn't concern ourselves that much with following the original plans when we did get there. But we did get there. We did get to the Age of Steam Roundhouse. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't equipped as a locomotive rebuild facility yet. It just had a handful of engines there, and that was really it. We rolled up and it was like, okay, there's some good things here, there's some mediocre things here. What are we going to pick? What are we going to take with us? And what are we going to leave here? Because it was nonetheless, it was a very central location. It had a lot of potential in that the building was there, but it didn't really have the amenities yet. And when we first came upon it, it was not something that we could work with. It became such very quickly. Some of the equipment from Steamtown actually got moved there right off, and then some of it actually got moved back to Steamtown as we got replacements and whatnot. But it's in a less dangerous location than Scranton, that's for sure. So the Age of Steam fleet became a project for a number of people that weren't officially on the train, but people from either that area or just other locomotive aficionados. You know, those who could effectively do that work and figure out what needed to be fixed on a significant fleet of locomotives, of which they had probably a dozen engines at that point in time. They'd only recently moved them in, if I recall correctly. And one of them was... at least one of them was workable. The one that was clearly workable was 1293. It was the kind of thing where we're like, okay, we know this guy works, and we should use him. We don't really know what else is available. We don't really know what else we can put a fire in and get moving. So it was kind of, I don't know, it wasn't as straightforward as you might hope. It's not like, wow, look at this wealth of locomotives. It was good because they were all in one place, but that isn't the only place where there were a lot of locomotives in one place. Any museum you could roll up on and find a good number of locomotives. And the thing is, even though it was a roundhouse and it was designed to preserve all these engines, they were not all in great shape. Some of them were in pretty rough shape, because they were project engines. They were stuff that was going to be worked on by the crew of the Age of Steam Roundhouse, and that never happened. I don't know. You know, there were a couple of people which claimed to belong to the Age of Steam Roundhouse. I do not know what the crew originally was. But the fact of the matter was, when we got out there, it was not in a location, or it was not populated. We got there, it was just empty. We looked around. We posted some people, people that wanted to stay there and see if they could work on the locomotives. And then we sort of left it be. And then they told us later that a couple of people had showed up that claimed to be part of the operation. And that knew enough that we believed them. It's not like, oh, sure you were, because, what are you going to do? Steal a locomotive? And they helped getting some locomotives under power. Now, the thing that was useful was, there was an engine there. 1293 is functional. Getting it fueled and oiled and watered and everything. That was a little bit more difficult because there was only some of the stuff on site. But eventually, is fairly quick in this measure. They got 1293 running fairly regularly in the area. There was a significant problem, though, and the biggest problem that was actually the area around Sugar Creek is fairly flat, and as I've talked about, flat areas really invite hordes, because you have nothing to block line of sight, you have nothing to block sound. If the wind is carrying a zombie's moan or the sound of a gunshot, it's going to be it's going to be heard over a long distance. There's nothing to slow it down, and that was a problem for the guys out there. The place was fenced, which was nice, but it was, the fence can only do so much, and there were a couple of times where they had to fully bail out of the Age of Steam Roundhouse and then come back later with more people. And sometimes with us as backup, or with, that actually, the last time that happened was actually fairly late. The military were planning to move across Ohio, and were expecting significant help from the Age of Steam Roundhouse in their, the people that worked the Zombie Train Incorporated stuff out of Sugar Creek, out of the Age of Steam Roundhouse. And they were ousted completely from the property by something like 50,000 zombies. It was this huge vestige of, it was this huge group that we hadn't run into before, and, they just got removed. There was nothing they could do about it. The zombies swarmed the premises, they knocked down the fences, they broke some glass, and that put a hold on supplies to the military, and they had to send out a contingent, and we had to send out a contingent, and we had to, clear all these zombies from the site, and that was a lot to do. We ended up leading them several miles away, meanwhile just, picking them off as they went. But, there was enough stuff there that it wasn't like we rolled up and, oh, this place is totally empty. It just wasn't done. And it was clearly not done. They were preparing to do something with holidays and veterans and stuff like that. There were big American flags hung up. And we went in there, it was only a few months after the Great Panic. And I don't know, it was kind of eerie because it was a place that was under construction then just abandoned. And there was effectively nothing there. No people there. Plenty of building supplies, which was useful, I guess, but we ended up not using a lot of them on site. We ended up carting them off to where we needed construction materials. It was just cool to find all that in one place. Some of the other equipment was particularly useful. I don't know. It was useful. It was extraordinarily useful because it was a lot of engines that were put in what can be considered a fairly advantageous position because they were at the edge of what you might consider the plains. They also had a canteen car, which is worth mentioning, because we sort of grabbed that, and then we didn't keep it. We grabbed it, and then we didn't return it to the Age of Steam Roundhouse because they were doing shorter trips. We ended up giving it to the Toronto Rail Lands in case they wanted to do longer trips, because we had already sort of jerry-rigged our tank car to do what we needed to serve as a canteen. And so we got it and figured it would be this huge improvement. And it was nice, but it was not necessarily better than what we had, or it was not. It was not a huge step up. It was better, but we didn't want to give them the crappy one that we knew how we did that. We knew how we made it, because when you jerry-rig something, when you throw something together like we did with the zombie train, it generally comes down to the people who made it to understand it, and that ends there. Explaining it to other people is usually prohibitively difficult in terms of time and effort, and so it's best to just keep a non-standard system with the people who understand it. So the stuff on the zombie train was pretty exclusive to the people on the zombie train, and when we got somebody new into the crew, it was very rare that they would have everything explained to them right away. If they were particularly clever, they might figure a lot of it out, and that's usually how we worked out who was going to be useful for what. But, it's worth saying that we kept a lot of stuff that was otherwise subpar, mostly because we were the ones that made it. And because when we found something that was comparable, we would want to give that to somebody else that could use it, because that's probably a more understandable design, and something that's less likely to break down. Again, not that... To a point, yes, we put the zombie train first, but to a point we also didn't want to leave other people high and dry, especially people that we were working with. Because, think about it, if something that we make breaks, we already know how to fix it, probably. We know how it works, so we know what could have broken, we know what affects what. If we give something we made to somebody else in lieu of taking the more standard option, in this case being the canteen, because this was a debate that ripped through the crew of the zombie train. And we take the good one, we take the canteen, and we give them our tank car, and something on the tank car breaks down, they're probably going to figure it out, but it's probably going to take them a lot longer, and it also might take them, contacting us and asking us, how did you do this? How do you, what do you recommend to fix this? Otherwise, we're on the same level. We didn't want to be tech support for all the other zombie train crews, all the other zombie train incorporated crews. That was a little bit of a motivation. That was something I slipped in there to get people to go, oh yeah, I guess you're right. We don't want to be spending our time. We don't want to be spending so much of our time trying to fix the things that we created, because we created them kind of jankily. But moreover, we don't want to be spending that time on the radio trying to communicate it to other people when the people that understand it are standing there next to us and may or may not be able to visualize the problem exactly, and it's easier when the people that made the stuff are with the stuff, and we didn't want to lose any important members of the zombie train, so we kept the stuff that was made largely. Eventually we would find designs that we liked. Sometimes we would have an idea for some such thing and distribute it to the crews, but usually with some sort of instruction manual or some little write-up to explain what the hell we were doing. Because it's necessary. It really is kind of necessary. I wish that we had manuals for so much of the stuff. Even just as an example, the pieces of machinery that did make it to the Age of Steam Roundhouse before the Great Panic hit. Same thing with Steamtown, but, we're talking about Age of Steam. We get there, and it's like, okay, we have these big pieces of machinery. We know they're supposed to be for working on the locomotives. But, admittedly, nobody in the crew was that good at rebuilding engines. Nobody in the crew had that kind of experience. We could take educated guesses. I could drive, and Paul could do welding and that sort of stuff. But nobody'd worked on a locomotive before. And we had a lot of shots in the dark, a lot of things that were questionable as to, do we really think this goes here? Are you sure? watched documentaries and I Googled and I had done a little bit of research, but I was by no means an expert and it was not something I'd ever done before. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you next week with more of the same. Trainman out.